Please don't walk away. Don't go, mister. Your little boy is crying. Can't you hear him? The tiny voice cut through the marble foyer like a knife through silk. 3 years old, barefoot, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit by one ear. And somehow, in 10 small words, she had just stopped the most powerful man in Manhattan dead in his tracks. He had ignored board meetings. He had silenced senators. But he could not, for reasons he would never fully understand, ignore her. Some doors close so quietly you don't realize they've locked until you're already outside. Ethan Cole had been walking away from his son for 8 months. He just hadn't called it that. Don't go, mister. Your little boy is crying. Can't you hear him? Ethan Cole stopped walking. His Italian leather shoes, $2,000 custom made, the kind that never squeaked on marble floors, went completely silent. His hand, already reaching for the front door handle, froze midair. He stood in the grand foyer of his Fifth Avenue penthouse, the kind of home that appeared in architecture magazines under headlines like Living Above the Clouds, and he felt something strange crawl up the back of his neck. He turned around slowly. She was standing at the base of the curved staircase, 3 years old if she was a day, wearing a tiny yellow dress with a strawberry print that had been washed so many times the strawberries had faded to pink shadows. Her feet were bare on the cold marble. Her hair was in 2 uneven pigtails, the kind a tired mother does in a hurry before work. She was holding a stuffed rabbit so old and loved that one of its button eyes had been replaced with a mismatched brown one. And she was staring at him with the absolute, unfiltered moral authority that only a toddler who doesn't yet understand power can carry. He's crying, she said again. Matter of fact. No accusation in her voice. Just truth. Up there. He's crying and he keeps calling for his daddy. Ethan's jaw tightened. Where is Mrs. Lawson? He asked. His voice came out colder than he intended. Usually did. She went to get his medicine. She told me stay here. The little girl tilted her head. She had enormous dark eyes, the kind that seemed to absorb everything. I'm Lily. My mama works here. She cleans the big rooms. I know who you are, Ethan said, though in truth he barely did. He knew his housekeeper, Rosa Vasquez, had a daughter she sometimes brought on Saturdays when the babysitter fell through. He had signed off on it without blinking. A small courtesy. Cost him nothing. Then you know I'm not lying, Lily said simply. He said daddy 4 times. I counted. Something inside Ethan Cole's chest cracked. Not broke. Just cracked the way ice sounds before it shifts. He had a meeting in 40 minutes. His car was waiting downstairs. Marcus Webb, his SO, had texted 3 times already. The quarterly numbers were a disaster, the Shanghai deal was hemorrhaging, and his legal team had found something in the Hargrove acquisition that made his stomach turn. He had 100 reasons to keep walking. He turned back toward the door anyway. He can't see you leave, Ethan said, and even as the words came out of his mouth, he hated how they sounded. Hello. Practice. The kind of thing a man says when he's been saying it so long he's stopped hearing himself. He won't know. Lily stared at him for a long moment. He knows, she said quietly. Blind people always know. Ethan Cole had built a $2.3 billion empire on the philosophy that emotion was a liability. He had learned this early. His father, a cold and brilliant man who smelled of cigars and boardroom leather, had taught him that the moment you let feelings into a decision, you had already begun to lose. Ethan had absorbed this lesson the way children absorb everything, completely without knowing it, so deep it became the architecture of who he was. He had been married once. Briefly. Beautifully, at first, the way things are when you are 34 and successful and you meet a woman who laughs like she means it and looks at you like you might be worth saving. Claire had been a cellist. She had soft hands and a sharp mind, and she had loved Ethan with a ferocity that frightened him more than any hostile takeover ever had. When she died, A brain aneurysm, sudden, senseless, 26 hours after giving birth to their son. Ethan had done what he always did with things that overwhelmed him. He had organized it, managed it, contained it. He had hired the best nanny, the best pediatric specialists, the best everything. He had built his son a world of careful, expensive care, and then he had stepped back from it, the way you step back from a fire that's getting too close, and told himself that providing was the same as being present. His son's name was Noah. Noah had been born with a condition called labor congenital amaurosis, a rare genetic disorder that had stolen his sight before he ever had the chance to use it. He would never see his father's face. He would never see the Manhattan skyline from the penthouse windows his father had paid $4 million for. He would navigate the world entirely by sound and touch and the remarkable internal map that blind children build, stone by stone in the dark. He was 3 years old and he was, by every account from every specialist and therapist and developmental expert Ethan had hired, an extraordinary child. Curious, verbal, emotionally perceptive in ways that made the adults around him shift uncomfortably, aware they were being seen by someone who technically couldn't see them. Ethan knew all of this from reports. He had not sat on the floor with his son in 6 weeks. He didn't go to his meeting. He wasn't sure exactly when he made the decision. Maybe it was Lily's voice. That small, unafraid voice that had called him back without asking for anything, without manipulation, without agenda. Maybe it was the word she used. Blind people always know. Maybe it was the way she stood there in her faded strawberry dress like a tiny prophet who had been specifically placed in his marble foyer to ruin his morning. He walked up the stairs. The second-floor hallway was quiet except for the faint sound of Mrs. Lawson's voice coming from behind a closed door at the far end, murmuring the soft, competent reassurances of a woman who had spent 30 years caring for other people's children. Ethan stopped outside the door. Through the wood, he heard his son's voice. "Daddy," was the specific, listening silence of a child who navigates by sound. "Daddy, is that you? I can hear your shoes." Ethan stood very still. "Your shoes make a different sound than Mrs. Lawson's," Noah said. His voice matter-of-fact, a little hopeful, a little careful, the voice of a child who has learned not to expect too much. "They're the clicking ones. The ones you wear when you're going somewhere." Ethan pressed his hand flat against the door. "Are you going somewhere, Daddy?" Behind him, from the top of the stairs, came a small sound. He turned. Lily had followed him up. She was standing in the hallway in her bare feet, rabbit dangling from one hand, watching him with those enormous dark eyes. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Ethan Cole, 38 years old, billionaire, man who had never once in his adult life made a decision based on fear, opened the door. "No," he said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended, scraped clean of its usual precision. "I'm not going anywhere." He heard his son exhale, and for the first time in 8 months, Ethan Cole sat down on the floor. Noah reached for him immediately. That was the thing about blind children that no developmental report had ever fully prepared Ethan for. They reached. Where sighted children might look first, assess, decide. Noah moved toward sound and warmth with a directness that was almost unbearable in its trust. His small hands found Ethan's sleeve, then his arm, then traveled upward with quick, sure fingers until they found his father's face. Ethan went completely still. He could not remember the last time someone had touched his face. "You stayed," Noah said. His fingers traced Ethan's jaw, his cheekbone, the ridge of his brow, reading him the way he read everything through his hands. "You smell like the outside. Like cars." "I was about to leave," Ethan said. Honest for once. The words felt strange in his mouth, like speaking a language he'd studied but never used. "But you didn't." Noah's fingers found the corner of Ethan's eye. "Mrs. Lawson says when people cry here." He tapped the spot lightly. "It means they're sad." "Are you sad, Daddy?" Ethan caught his son's hand gently. held it. "I'm working on it," he said. From the corner of the room, Lily was watching them both. She had settled herself cross-legged on Noah's alphabet rug, her rabbit in her lap, with the serene patience of someone who had decided this was exactly where she was supposed to be. Mrs. Lawson stood near the doorway, a small medicine cup in one hand, her expression carefully neutral, the professional blankness of a woman who had seen too much in this house to show surprise at anything. "She stayed with him," Mrs. Lawson said quietly, nodding toward Lily. "When he was crying. She sat right next to him and held his hand and told him a story about a rabbit who was afraid of thunder." Ethan looked at Lily. Lily shrugged one small shoulder. "The rabbit wasn't scared of the thunder," she said, correcting the record. "The rabbit just didn't know yet that thunder couldn't hurt him. There's a difference." Ethan stayed for 3 hours. He canceled the meeting. Then he canceled the one after it. Marcus Webb called twice and Ethan let it go to voicemail, which in 12 years of working together he had never once done. He sat on the alphabet rug and he let Noah show him things, the model of the solar system with the textured planets, each one a different material so Noah could feel the difference between Saturn's rings and Jupiter's smooth curve. The audiobooks lined up in their special case. The collection of rocks Noah had been building, each one labeled in Braille by Mrs. Lawson, each one with a story. "This one is from a volcano," Noah said, pressing a chunk of dark porous rock into Ethan's hand. "It's called basalt. Dr. Reeves brought it. She said volcanoes are just mountains that got too full of feelings and had to let them out." Ethan turned the rock over in his hand. "Smart volcano," he said. Noah giggled. It was a sound Ethan realized, with a slow and sickening clarity, that he had not heard in a very long time. Not because Noah didn't laugh. Mrs. Lawson said he laughed constantly, but because Ethan had not been in the room for it. Lily, for her part, had inserted herself into the proceedings with complete comfort. She had introduced herself to Noah within approximately 45 seconds of Ethan opening the door. "I'm Lily, I'm 3'2", my rabbit's name is Gerald," and Noah had accepted this information and immediately asked if Gerald was afraid of thunder. They had been operating as a unit ever since, with the frictionless ease of very young children who haven't yet learned to be suspicious of each other. "Gerald has a different smell than my stuffed animals," Noah told Ethan seriously. "He smells like Lily's house." "What does Lily's house smell like?" Ethan asked. "Soup. And something warm." Noah considered. "Like when you leave bread in the toaster too long but not burnt. Just warm." Lily nodded confirmation. "Mama makes a lot of soup," she said. Rosa Vasquez appeared at noon. She came through the service entrance the way she always did, quietly, efficiently, already pulling her cleaning supplies from the utility closet before she registered that something was different. She heard her daughter's voice from upstairs. Not unusual, Lily wondered, but then she heard a man's voice and she felt her stomach drop. She found them in Noah's room. Her daughter and the billionaire's blind son sitting side by side on the alphabet rug, and Ethan Cole, who Rosa had worked for 2 years and exchanged perhaps 30 words with total, sitting cross-legged on the floor between them, holding a piece of volcanic rock. Rosa stood in the doorway with her mouth open. "Mr. Cole," she said, and her voice came out slightly strangled. "I'm so sorry. I told Lily to stay downstairs. She wasn't supposed to." "She's fine," Ethan said. He looked up at Rosa, and there was something in his face that she had never seen there before. Something unguarded. Like a window that had been painted shut for years and someone had finally worked the latch. She's been good with him. She said his daddy was going somewhere," Noah said matter-of-factly. "But then he didn't." Rosa looked at her daughter. Lily met her mother's eyes with an expression of absolute innocence and held up Gerald the rabbit. "We were just talking," Lily said. It was later, after Rosa had quietly resumed her work, after Mrs. Lawson had given Noah his medication and settled him for his afternoon rest, after Lily had fallen asleep on the alphabet rug clutching Gerald and been carefully carried downstairs by her mother, that Ethan finally checked his phone. 22 messages. 4 missed calls. And 1 email from Marcus Webb with a subject line that read, "Where are you? Hargrove situation critical." He read the email. Then he set his phone face down on Noah's bookshelf and listened to his son breathe in the quiet afternoon. The Hargrove situation was bad. He had known it was coming. There were irregularities in the acquisition documents, suggestions that the previous ownership had concealed significant environmental liabilities on 3 properties in New Jersey. If it broke publicly before Ethan's legal team could contain it, the damage would be 9 figures minimum. His investors would panic. The board would call an emergency session. It would be the worst crisis his company had faced in 6 years. He sat with this information and felt something he hadn't expected. Not fear. Not the sharp, energizing alarm that business crises usually triggered in him. Just a very quiet, very clear voice somewhere under his sternum that said, "It's only money." He picked up his phone. He called Marcus back. "Where have you been?" Marcus said immediately. His voice taut with controlled panic. "Ethan, the Hargrove thing is." "I know," Ethan said. "Set up the legal call for 5 o'clock. We'll get ahead of it." 5 o'clock. "Ethan, we need to." 5 o'clock, Marcus. "I'm with my son." Silence on the other end of the line. Marcus Webb had worked with Ethan Cole for 12 years, and he had never once heard him say those words. "Okay," Marcus said finally, carefully. 5 o'clock. Ethan hung up. Noah stirred in his sleep and murmured something. Not a word, just a sound. "Content. If." Ethan leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. He didn't leave until Noah woke up and asked for him. The Hargrove crisis broke on a Tuesday. It hit the financial press at 6 a.m. A story in the Wall Street Journal sourced to 3 anonymous insiders, detailed enough that Ethan's communications team knew immediately it wasn't a leak so much as a coordinated strike. Someone had fed the story deliberately. Someone who wanted coal industries bleeding in public. By 7, Ethan's phone had accumulated 41 notifications. By 7:15, his stock had dropped 4%. By 7:30, his board chair, a 70-year-old former Treasury official named Howard Briggs, had called twice and texted once, which was the corporate equivalent of someone pounding on your door at midnight. Ethan was in Noah's room when all of this happened. He was sitting on the edge of Noah's bed reading aloud from a book about ocean animals. One of Noah's obsessions, the deep sea specifically, the creatures that lived in total darkness and generated their own light. He had discovered this obsession 11 days ago, which was how long it had been since the morning Lily had stopped him in the foyer. 11 days during which something in the structure of Ethan's life had been quietly, irrevocably rearranging itself. "The anglerfish makes its own light," Noah said before Ethan could read the page. "It carries it on its head. So even in the dark it can see." "You knew that already," Ethan said. "I know all of them already." Noah said this without apology. "But I like hearing you read them. Your voice is different when you read. It's slower." Ethan's phone buzzed for the 42nd time. "Is that work?" Noah asked. "Yes." "Is it bad work or regular work?" Ethan considered the question seriously. The way he had learned Noah deserved to have questions considered. "Somewhere in between," he said. "Someone is trying to hurt our company. Trying to make people scared so they make bad decisions." Noah thought about this. "Like a bully." "Exactly like a bully. Mrs. Lawson says bullies are scared of something too. That's why they do it." Ethan set the ocean book down. "Mrs. Lawson is usually right." He kissed his son on the top of the head. Another thing he had rediscovered in 11 days, the specific weight of that gesture, how natural it felt, how much he had been starving for it without knowing, and went to handle the crisis. What nobody on his board knew, what Marcus Webb didn't know, what none of the sharp-eyed financial journalists currently sharpening their pieces about the potential collapse of coal industry's latest acquisition knew, was this: Ethan had already found the source of the leak. It was Daniel Hargrove, the previous owner himself. The sale had been Hargrove's idea. He had approached Coal Industries 18 months ago, motivated, Ethan had believed, by a desire to liquidate and retire. What Ethan had not known, what his due diligence had failed to uncover until his legal team started pulling thread on the environmental liability issue, was that Hargrove had approached 4 other buyers before Ethan. All 4 had walked away after their own investigations. Hargrove had hidden the contamination data in a subsidiary's records, buried under 3 layers of shell company. He had sold Ethan a ticking bomb and apparently intended to detonate it himself, at maximum damage, for reasons Ethan had not yet fully mapped. Personal, Marcus had said. Someone told me it's personal. Ethan had spent 2 days trying to figure out what he had ever done to Daniel Hargrove. They had met exactly twice. Shaken hands. The man had seemed pleased with the deal. He got the answer at 9 a.m., 40 minutes into the emergency board call, from the least expected direction. His phone, sitting beside his laptop on the home office desk, lit up with a text from an unsaved number. "You don't remember me. You wouldn't. I was one of 40 people you laid off from Meridian Tech in 2019. My name is Carol Hargrove. Daniel is my brother. I lost my house. My daughter's college fund. I just wanted you to know it wasn't random." Ethan stared at the message while Howard Briggs talked on speakerphone about investor confidence and damage containment. 40 people. A small acquisition 5 years ago. A company he had restructured and sold 18 months later. He had signed the paperwork and moved on and never thought about it again. 40 people had thought about it every day since. He was still at his desk at noon when the knock came. Low on the door. Knuckle height for a toddler. He opened it to find Lily standing in the hallway, Gerald under one arm, looking up at him with focused attention. "Noah says you sound like when the sky gets heavy," she said. Ethan blinked. "What?" "Before it rains. When the air gets tight." She tilted her head. "He said you've been in here a long time and you sound like that." Ethan leaned against the doorframe. Across the hall through Noah's open door, he could hear his son, not crying, not upset, just present, running a small car along the edge of his bookshelf, click click click, patient as a metronome. "I made a mistake," Ethan said. He wasn't sure why he was telling a 3-year-old this. Except that somehow with Lily, honesty felt less like vulnerability and more like simply stating weather. "A long time ago. I hurt people and I didn't notice. And now they're hurting me back." Lily considered this gravely. "Did you say sorry?" "I didn't know I needed to." "That's the worst kind of sorry," Lily said. "Mama says those are the hardest ones. When you didn't know. Because you can't go back." "No," Ethan agreed. "You can't. But you can go forward." She held up Gerald. Gerald was scared of thunder because he didn't know what it was. But once he knew it was just noise, just the sky being loud, he wasn't scared anymore. She looked at Ethan steadily. "Maybe the lady just wanted you to know." Ethan looked at this child for a long moment. "Maybe she did," he said quietly. "Are you going to say sorry anyway?" Lily asked. "Even if it's late." Ethan pushed off the doorframe. He walked back to his desk. He picked up his phone. He typed. "I remember the Meridian layoffs. I handled them badly. I'm sorry for what your family lost. That doesn't fix it. But I am sorry." He hesitated for 3 seconds. Then he sent it. He didn't know if it would change anything with Daniel Hargrove. He didn't know if it would stop the bleeding in the press or calm his investors or satisfy his board. He didn't know if a text message could carry the weight of what he actually owed. But Lily was standing in his doorway watching him with those enormous dark eyes, and he found that he cared, for the first time in a long time, about being the kind of man who could be looked at without flinching. The response from Carol Hargrove came at 2:47 in the afternoon. It was 4 words. "Why are you telling me this?" Ethan typed back. "Because a 3-year-old asked me if I was going to say sorry anyway." Long pause. Then, "That's the strangest thing anyone has ever said to me." "Then call me." Her voice was not what he expected. He had built a picture of her in his mind without meaning to. Grief sharp, brittle, carrying 5 years of anger like a stone. But Carol Hargrove's voice was tired more than anything. The specific exhaustion of someone who had been holding something heavy for so long they'd stopped noticing the weight. She was 51. She had worked in Meridian's engineering department for 9 years. When the layoff came, she had been 3 years from vesting her full pension. The timing had not been an accident of fate. It had been a function of how the restructuring had been designed, cutting precisely at the point that cost the company the least while costing the employees the most. Ethan had not designed it. But he had approved it, signed off on the efficiency model without reading the human details underneath the numbers. "I'm not calling to make a deal," Ethan said. "I'm not calling to contain this or ask you to talk your brother down. He stopped. Started again. "I want to understand what we actually took from you. Not in aggregate. From you specifically." Silence. "Why?" Carol asked. "Because I've spent the last 11 days learning to pay attention to what I ignored," Ethan said. "I'm starting at the beginning." Another pause. Then slowly, Carol Hargrove began to talk. She talked for 40 minutes. Ethan listened without interrupting, without pivoting to solutions, without doing the thing he always did, which was to locate the problem and immediately begin engineering the fix. He just listened. The pension. The daughter's tuition. The house in New Jersey that she'd had to sell at a loss when the market was bad. The job she'd found afterward. A significant step down, a salary 30% lower, and the daily grinding indignity of being overqualified for everything she could get. "Daniel didn't plan this from the beginning," she said finally. "He only found out about the contamination issue last year. From the new management, actually, they came to him when they found it. He could have cooperated. But he was so..." A pause. "He was so angry on my behalf. He's always been protective. Sometimes too protective." "Is he going to keep pushing?" Ethan asked. "I don't know. I didn't know he was doing this until this morning." Her voice tightened. "I found out the same way everyone else did. He didn't tell me. He knew I'd try to stop him." "Would you have?" "Yes." No hesitation. "Revenge doesn't give me my pension back. It doesn't fix anything. It keeps everything in the same place. Frozen." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then, "I want to make a proposal. Not a legal settlement. Not a negotiation. Just a proposal. You can say no." Carol waited. "The contamination liability is real," Ethan said. "We're going to clean it up. That's not in question. The cost is significant, and yes, it hurts the acquisition value, and my board is furious. And that's our problem to manage, not yours." He paused. "But separately. The pension you lost. The gap it created. I want to address that directly." "You can't buy." "I'm not trying to buy anything," Ethan said quietly. "I'm trying to pay a debt. There's a difference." He found Noah and Lily in the living room at 4 o'clock. They had, with Mrs. Lawson's apparently resigned permission, constructed an elaborate landscape on the living room floor using couch cushions, throw blankets, every pillow in the house, and what appeared to be the entire contents of Noah's stuffed animal collection. It was a world. Lily had assigned each animal a role and was narrating in a low, serious voice while Noah moved the characters through the terrain by touch, his face bright with concentration. "The bear lives here," Lily was explaining, pointing to a cushion fort. "But he's scared to go outside because the last time he went outside something bad happened." "What happened?" Noah asked. "He lost someone." Lily's voice was matter-of-fact in the way children are matter-of-fact about big things, before they learn that adults prefer those things wrapped in euphemism. Someone he loved went away and didn't come back. So now he stays inside because if he doesn't go out, nothing can go away again. Noah was quiet for a moment, his hand resting on the bear. That's not how it works though, he said finally. Things can go away even if you stay inside. My mama went away and I was just being born. The room went very still. Ethan, standing in the doorway, felt the breath go out of him. I know, Lily said gently. But the bear doesn't know that yet. He still thinks if he's careful enough, nothing bad will happen. He paused. He needs someone to come get him. To go into the house and say, come out. I'll be with you. It's okay to come out. Noah picked up the bear. Held it for a moment. Who goes to get him? He asked. Lily pointed across the cushioned landscape to a small figure Ethan hadn't noticed. A plastic toy, a little person, standing at the edge of the fort. Someone who wasn't scared anymore, she said. Someone who learned. Noah placed the bear next to the little person. Okay, he said softly. Okay, they can go out now. From the doorway, unseen by either child, Ethan Cole pressed the back of his hand to his mouth. He stood there for a long time in the quiet living room, watching his son hold a stuffed bear and learning apparently the same thing. The story broke differently than anyone expected. Ethan published it himself. Not through his PR firm, not through a carefully worded statement vetted by 7 lawyers, but a direct post. His name, his voice on the company's public channel, that laid out the Hargrove situation with a clarity that his communications team described, in various levels of horror, as unprecedented, inadvisable, and going to either save us or destroy us, and we genuinely don't know which. He wrote about the contamination. He wrote about the cleanup plan and the full cost and the timeline. He wrote about the pension restructuring at Meridian 5 years ago and what it had actually done to the people underneath the efficiency numbers. He did not name Carol Hargrove. He did not name anyone. But he did not hide behind language either. I made decisions at a distance, he wrote. I managed numbers and trusted that the human cost had been absorbed by systems I had designed for exactly that purpose. That is not the same as not being responsible. I know that now. I knew it before, I think, in the way you know something you're not ready to look at directly. His board called it a catastrophe before the markets opened. By noon, something strange was happening. The story was moving, not in the direction of destruction, but sideways, into territory no financial analyst had modeled. People were sharing it. Not investment people, not industry people, but regular people. The comment section filled with stories. Layoffs, pensions, restructuring, the gap between the clean language of quarterly reports and the jagged reality of what those reports represented in actual human lives. One comment had 40,000 likes by 3 in the afternoon. It said simply, "This is the first time I've ever heard someone at this level say the quiet part out loud." Marcus Webb called at 3 p.m. His voice stripped of its usual careful neutrality. "Our institutional investors are holding," he said. 3 of them called to say, and I'm quoting, that the transparency play was either the smartest or stupidest thing they'd ever seen, but either way they respected it. The stock is actually up 2%. That wasn't why I did it, Ethan said. I know, Marcus said. That's probably why it's working. Daniel Hargrove called that evening. Ethan answered. The call lasted 12 minutes. Hargrove's voice was not what Ethan expected either. Not triumphant, not defeated, just worn. A man who had spent a year building something to hurt someone and found, at the moment of detonation, that the explosion had gone in an unexpected direction. Carol told me what you're doing, Hargrove said. With the pension. It's not a negotiation, Ethan said. It's not contingent on anything. Silence. Why? Hargrove asked. Same question his sister had asked. Same exhausted confusion of people who had dealt in transactions long enough that a gesture with no angle attached to it seemed like a trick. I have a son, Ethan said. He's 3 years old. He's been trying to teach me something for the last 2 weeks, and I've been a slow student. He paused. I'm trying to get better. Another long silence. The contamination on the Jersey properties, Hargrove said finally. I know where all the documentation is. The full record, not just what we disclosed. It'll make the cleanup faster, easier, cheaper. His voice was flat, stripped of whatever had fueled 11 months of planning. I'll send it to your legal team. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, Hargrove said. I'm doing it anyway. Tell your son. Tell him whatever you tell a 3-year-old. That someone who was behaving badly decided to stop. Rosa Vasquez came to Ethan's home office the next morning. She knocked carefully, waited for him to say come in, stepped inside with a specific posture of a woman who has spent years making herself small in other people's spaces. I need to talk to you about Lily, she said. Mr. Cole, I know she's been extraordinary, Ethan said. Rosa blinked. Clearly not what she'd prepared for. She's been getting into things she shouldn't. She's not supposed to be upstairs. I've been telling her. Rosa. Ethan leaned forward. 11 days ago your daughter stopped me from walking out the door on my son. She has spent almost 2 weeks being his friend. Genuinely, without being asked, without anyone organizing it. She talked to him about his mother in a way that I have not managed to do. She told me to apologize to someone I had hurt even though she had no idea what the stakes were. He paused. She is 3 years old and she is a better person than I have been for most of the last year. Rosa stared at him. Her eyes had gone bright. I'm not saying that to embarrass you, Ethan said quietly. I'm saying it because you raised her. And I don't know how, given everything. Given that you spend your days cleaning other people's houses and you come in through the service entrance and I have barely spoken to you in 2 years, I don't know how she has that much grace. But she does. And it comes from somewhere. Rosa pressed her lips together. Looked at the floor for a moment. Her father was like that, she said, her voice careful. He could see people. He always said everyone is carrying something. You just have to look. He died when she was 1. She never knew him. But sometimes I think she stopped. She just sees people. I don't know how. Neither do I, Ethan said. But I'm glad she saw us. Spring came to Manhattan the way it always did. Suddenly after weeks of gray, as if the city had been holding its breath and finally let go. Ethan noticed it in a way he hadn't in years. Noah had insisted, 11 days into their new routine, that they go to the park. Just the park. Not a special therapeutic outing organized by Mrs. Lawson, not a structured visit to the botanical garden. Just the park, with a regular noise and the pigeons and the smell of hot dogs from the cart on the corner. Ethan had stood at the edge of the playground and watched his son move through it. Noah had been here before with Mrs. Lawson, and he knew the layout the way he knew all the spaces he was allowed to love. Thoroughly, precisely, the map built through careful repeated exploration. He went to the swing set first. He liked the swings because of the wind, he'd explained, the way it changed depending on how high you went, the feeling of air becoming a different thing at different speeds. Lily had come too. Rosa had brought her. The two of them meeting Ethan and Noah at the park entrance with the ease of a routine they'd fallen into without anyone officially declaring it a routine. Lily ran immediately to the swings, grabbed the one beside Noah, and began pumping her legs with ruthless determination. Higher, she announced. We have to go higher than the birds. There are no birds here, Noah said, already swinging. I can't hear any. There will be, Lily said confidently. I'll find some. 3 weeks after the Hargrove story broke, Ethan stood in front of his board and presented a restructured proposal for how Cole Industries would handle all future acquisitions. It included a line item he had never had before, a human impact review. Independent. Required. With teeth. Howard Briggs, board chair, 70 years old, man who had sat on more boards than he could count and seen more corporate fashions cycle through than he cared to remember, looked at the proposal for a long time. "This will slow things down," he said. "Yes," Ethan agreed. "It will cost us deals sometimes. Opportunities we'd have taken before." "Yes." Howard looked at him over his reading glasses. "What changed?" Ethan thought about a faded strawberry dress. About a stuffed rabbit with mismatched eyes. About a little girl standing in a marble foyer saying blind people always know with the absolute certainty of someone who hadn't yet learned to doubt her own perceptions. "I started paying attention," he said, "to what I'd been walking away from." On a Saturday in April, Ethan Cole sat in his living room while his son and a small girl named Lily rebuilt the cushioned city for what was probably the 15th time. Rosa Vasquez sat across from him with a cup of coffee. Not the service entrance, not the utility closet, but the living room, because Ethan had asked her to stay, had said please, had meant it, and they talked about her daughter the way parents talk about children who astonish them. "She asked me last week if Noah would ever be able to see," Rosa said. "I told her probably not. Medicine is getting better, but we don't know." She looked at her daughter, currently directing Noah to place a blanket mountain in exactly the right position. She thought about it for a minute. Then she said, "That's okay. He sees good anyway. Just different." Ethan watched his son carefully position the blanket mountain and feel its edges and then smile. That specific smile, private and satisfied, that meant something had landed exactly where he wanted it. "She's right," Ethan said. Noah turned his head then, with the uncanny accuracy he had for locating his father, and said, "Daddy, come here. We need you for the mountain part." Ethan set down his coffee. He crossed the room. He sat down on the floor in the middle of the cushioned city, between his son and the small girl in the strawberry dress, and he let them put a blanket over his head because apparently the mountain needed a cave and he was the best available cave option. Inside the blanket cave, in the warm dim light, he heard his son laugh. And from somewhere outside the cave, in a small and certain voice, "See? I told you he would stay." Ethan Cole did not become a perfect man in the spring that Lily Vasquez was 3 years old, and Gerald the rabbit was ageless, and Noah learned the shape of his father's face with his hands. He remained impatient sometimes. He still moved too fast in rooms where he should slow down. There were board meetings that ran longer than his son's patience, and crises that ate evenings he had promised. But he came back. Every time he came back, he sat on the floor. He read the ocean book aloud even when Noah already knew every word. He learned the specific weight of a child's head against his shoulder, and the way darkness is not the absence of sight but the presence of everything else, sound and warmth and the small particular smell of someone you love. Rosa Vasquez received a full benefits package and a significant raise, retroactive. She did not move through the service entrance anymore. She stayed for coffee on Saturdays, and sometimes they talked for a long time about her husband who could see people, and Claire who had played cello, and the children they had been given who were nothing like what they expected and everything they needed. Lily started a new story one afternoon, unprompted, while Noah listened and Gerald presided from his place of honor on the bookshelf. "Once there was a man who was very fast," she began. "He ran everywhere because he thought if he stopped, everything would fall apart." He paused. "But then a little boy showed him that the best things don't fall apart when you stop. They were just waiting for you to be still enough to hold them." Noah reached out and found his father's hand in the space between them. Ethan held on. He did not let go. Some people learn the most important lessons of their lives from professors, from failure, from years of careful study. Ethan Cole learned his from a 3-year-old in a faded strawberry dress who stood in his marble foyer with a one-eyed rabbit and said the truest thing anyone had ever said to him: blind people always know. He had been seen fully by a child who barely reached his knee, and that seeing, patient and unafraid, had changed the entire direction of his life.